Hello and welcome to Draft Questions Answered. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave your questions in the comment section down below and hit the like button so I'll know to make more episodes in the future. Diving into the first question, how do you apply 17 lands data to your drafts? Now, in short form, I think that the answer is that you shouldn't really be looking at 17 lands data until you have either an in-depth knowledge of statistics or you are skilled enough that you've already mastered the basics. You need to know how to build a mana curve, how to read signals, how to figure out what your deck's overall game plan is before you're really going to benefit at all from diving into the numbers. Simply looking at the simplified column of games in hand win rate, which is what many players who look at 17 lands data do, is not going to help you improve at Magic or really even help your win rate all that much if you are still lacking a lot of the fundamentals. You're going to improve exponentially more by spending that time, the brain power, focusing on other aspects of your game. However, once you do reach that point, I think the best way to use 17 lands data, and the way I find the most interesting, is to sort by cards that have high win rates and are picked late in the draft, and then try to figure out why that is. It's not really ever about just looking at the numbers for me. It's always about trying to figure out why a particular number gives some interpretation of a card that I had not thought of before. And by looking at cards that have high win rates and are picked late, you can maybe find something that is undervalued. Good question. Moving on to the next question, which sets have been the best/worst for draft? This came from a couple different people, so I just wanted to answer it relatively generally. One of the recent sets that I really enjoyed was Ikoria. I think that it was really good because it had a lot of fixing. There were some really cool decks you could draft in terms of the cycling deck and the mutate deck in particular, which were really fun, but you could also just play a bunch of splashy decks. There were some ultimatums you could cast, and it was really just a fun set for me overall. I also liked recent sets such as Rivals of Ixalan. I guess that's not that recent, but that was a set that I liked that was in the kind of mid-range history. And I also liked Hour of Devastation, which was one of my favorite formats that I've ever drafted. So those are some of my favorites relatively recently. And then going a little bit farther back, I really liked Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon. Those sets just kind of had some cool graveyard themes going on, and they had some fun mechanics like Investigate and stuff like that. I think one of the factors that I like in a set is that the set feels like it has a lot of decision making involved, and that you don't really run out of stuff to do in the mid game, so you have plenty of opportunities to eke out card advantage. I do, however, want to note that I don't love the sets where it's too easy to get card advantage. The sets where every card is a 2-for-1, or like Master sets or Vintage Cube drafts or things like that, those are not really my favorite sets to draft, because those sets tend to be just like every card is good, and so drafting isn't about assembling a deck of high quality cards, it's about finding the right cards among the high quality cards. And it feels like I have less room to get an advantage there, and so I don't enjoy those sets as much, because it just doesn't feel like my decisions are as impactful, because I'm going to end up with enough playables and enough good cards no matter what I do. So those are the sets that I don't enjoy the most, as the ones I also like. In that same vein, Masters sets are also kind of generally fall into that same kind of spot where it's like the card quality is a little bit too high for my liking just across the board, and so it feels like you don't really have to read signals as much, because you're always going to end up with enough playables if you just have like even general sense of what's going on. And then final question, how do economics and MTG overlap? A lot of folks know that I have an economics degree, and so they wanted to see my perspective. And I would say that the biggest kind of like concept from economics that transfers over to Magic the Gathering is probably the idea of like opportunity cost, and like what am I giving up by doing this play, or just kind of the general mindset of thinking about things probabilistically, or just overall as a holistic approach to just mindset wise. Because in economics, a lot of it is about understanding human decisions and how like behavioral economics especially, what goes into a human decision that maybe isn't immediately apparent. So like if you're buying something from the grocery store, buying something because it's at eye level on the shelf instead of like reaching down all the way to the bottom shelf, or things of that nature. That's like behavioral economics at its finest. And I think that in Magic the Gathering, there are a lot of things that players do that you can kind of not figure out, but I think it just kind of helps understand the sorts of cards that people are going to like to run in their deck, or the odds of a player having a particular card, or the cost of playing around a particular card in a particular situation. And really, I think the idea of playing for the win instead of playing not to lose, just that's the sort of mindset that you can kind of overlap a little bit. It's kind of hard to pick out particular concepts because there's not really supply and demand curve. I have made a couple videos about like how Magic the Gathering economics does work in terms of like the production of cards and Magic the Gathering's like supply and demand curves. But I think this question is more aimed at gameplay side of things. And I think generally that's just a mindset thing in terms of how you think about decisions and how you think about costs and benefits of those decisions. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. As I said at the beginning, if you enjoy this, comment below with your questions for the next edition and hit the like button so I know to make more of these in the future. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.